Abortion rights take a historic hit from Congress. What do women face? And will the new restrictions hold up in court? As civilian deaths mount in Iraq, some critics say one elite American combat unit is too willing to shoot. We'll have a CBS News independent investigation. Washing away in Washington state, record rains threaten floods along 11 western rivers. And surviving the plunge. He went over Niagara Falls and lived to tell about it to a judge.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. It is one of the biggest developments in the battle over abortion rights since the Supreme Court's landmark ruling supporting a woman's right to choose 30 years ago. Congress tonight gave final approval to legislation making it a crime for doctors to perform certain types of late-term abortions. Legislation President Bush says he will sign into law. CBS's Elizabeth Caledon looks tonight beyond the politics and rhetoric to the medical impact this law could have.
The Senate's only physician set the tone.
It's an egregious, outlandish, ghoulish procedure.
But many other doctors will disagree with the abortion bill passed by Congress. Specifically, the legislation reads late-term abortion is never medically necessary to preserve the health of the mother. Major medical groups, including the American Medical Association, do not support the procedure, generally performed between the 18th and 24th weeks of a pregnancy. The AMA even states, except in extraordinary circumstances, maternal health factors can be accommodated without sacrifice of the fetus. But doctors like Paul Blumenthal say combining the words never and late-term abortions could easily jeopardize a woman's health and tie her doctor's hands.
There are situations in which we may have no choice but to provide a procedure that this bill will declare illegal.
Though difficult to foresee and outline, any number of complications can arise during a pregnancy. By outlawing even one option, no matter how rarely used, ethicists believe Congress is treading on dangerous ground.
This decision should be left with the physician and the woman.
Audrey Eisen agonized before undergoing the procedure, not to preserve her own health, but because her pregnancy went terribly wrong. She is outraged the government is prying into the most personal and painful decision a woman can make.
This is just the place for the woman, her physician, and her family.
Legal experts say things are unlikely to change anytime soon, since a legal challenge is expected to go to the highest levels of the judicial system. Dan?
Elizabeth Caledon, thanks. There's been a sudden reversal in a wrenching right-to-die case in Florida. Last week, after a long legal battle, doctors took a severely brain-damaged woman off life support that had kept her alive for years. Today, Governor Jeb Bush used emergency authority from the state legislature to order life support reinstated. The court battle will resume. In Iraq today, Iraqi police, backed by U.S. troops, raided a mosque in the city of Karbala and arrested 40 gunmen loyal to a militant Shiite cleric. In Fallujah, troops of the 82nd Airborne Division were attacked for a third straight day. No casualties reported this time, but as CBS's Alan Pizzi reports, in Fallujah, the 82nd has struggled to impose peace with nothing but the tools of war.
With ambushes and roadside bombs a daily occurrence, U.S. troops in Iraq operate under rules designed for war. A Human Rights Watch report claims that has created an atmosphere of impunity in which many soldiers feel they can pull the trigger without coming under review. The 82nd Airborne in Fallujah was singled out. Fallujah was one of the last places in this part of Iraq to be taken over by conquering U.S. troops, and initially it offered them the least resistance. And then something went wrong. For example, in April, 18 civilians killed and at least 78 wounded when 82nd Airborne troops fire on protesters. In September, 10 Iraqi police dead and 10 wounded when the 82nd mistakes them for the enemy. And the same month, south of Baghdad, 2 civilians, including a 12-year-old girl, killed in response to a shot through a door.
I counted more than 177 rounds hitting this north wall and over a 30-yard area. I believe that there was a disproportionate response by the 82nd Airborne.
But that's how they are allowed to respond to anyone defined as hostile.
It is our mission, and it is within our rules of engagement to pursue that hostile force until he either surrenders or he is defeated or destroyed.
The 82nd Airborne is a highly trained combat unit, and therein may lie the root of the problem.
Take a soldier and try to make him a policeman overnight. It's a difficult job for a trained policeman to do, let alone a soldier who is not completely trained in such operations. So we're asking them to do pretty much the impossible.
But the military already knew that. In Afghanistan, Special Forces soldiers complained combat troops undermined their hearts and minds effort.
Since the 82nd got here, the whole attitude of the community around here has changed. They're throwing rocks at us now. Before, they used to cheer and laugh.
The 82nd came to Fallujah expecting trouble.
They hype it up a lot and they make it sound worse than what it really is, and I think it scares a lot of guys. And you're going to do what you have to protect yourself, but I think sometimes we get carried away.
The U.S. military has reevaluated its iron fist policy in Iraq, but the damage may already have been done.
Relax. Relax.
Alan Pizzi, CBS News, Fallujah.
President Bush is spending the night in Singapore, the fifth stop on his Asia-Pacific tour. The president praised Singapore's active cooperation in fighting terrorism and its support of the U.S.-led war in Iraq. Tomorrow, en route to Australia, the president stops briefly in Bali, Indonesia, where suicide bombers killed more than 200 people last year and where the threat remains high, as CBS's Barry Peterson reports.
What you are watching is a sales pitch for terrorism. This video, shot in Indonesia and obtained by CBS News, is being used to generate donations from rich Muslims, mostly in the Middle East, with one key target in mind.
The United States is seen as enemy number one of Islam by these people.
I just don't believe what happened here tonight.
The Bali bombing a year ago was a wake-up call for authorities, especially in Indonesia, the world's most populous Muslim country. It prompted a crackdown across Asia, leading to the arrest of hundreds of suspects, including Ridwan Isamuddin, known as Hambali, believed to have masterminded the attack. But as this video shows, there are plenty more terrorists in training, and one leading expert in Indonesia says the threat is still very real.
I think this network is bigger and deeper and more extensive than I think we had any idea of.
The network extends across Asia. Experts say there were attacks planned from Indonesia to Malaysia and Singapore and the Philippines all the way to Thailand. The CIA believes Al-Qaeda is among those funding these Asian groups, and terrorism experts say some of that money is being funneled through a Muslim charity in Indonesia called Compaq. But Compaq insists its only job is helping the poor in times of crisis. And because the government is afraid of offending its Muslim population, cracking down on a well-known charity is not so easy in Indonesia. Because of the threat of terrorism, the American Club in Jakarta has changed its name to the International Club, and many Americans have changed the way they live.
We're more careful where we go. We avoid large gatherings.
And across this region, America's presence in Iraq has become recruiting tool number one, bringing to the terrorist camps a whole new crop of young people like these, hoping to get Americans in their sights and ready to kill if and when they do. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Tokyo.
The U.S. Defense Department said today a top Army general's comments about Islam will be investigated at the general's own request. General William Boykin is quoted in at least one speech in uniform before a Christian group as implying Muslims worship an idol and saying the war on terrorism is a war against Satan. Some critics have called for Boykin to resign, saying they are concerned about the reputation of America and the U.S. Army among the Islamic population around the world. Torrential rains, wave after wave, are taking their toll on the Pacific Northwest and up into Canada. You know there's a problem when Seattle sets a new one-day rainfall record. Now, the whole region's rivers are on a dangerous high roll. CBS's John Blackstone is tracking the Northwest flood threat.
We are on evacuation warning. High flood waters early in the morning. even in a part of the country accustomed to rain, it has never before rained like this.
This is the first time I've seen it this bad in a long time. It's real bad.
In Seattle, more than 5 inches fell in 24 hours, the wettest day in the city in 112 years of record keeping.
I'm afraid we're in for the worst.
Throughout western Washington, unrelenting rain
I might have to swim home or get a boat or something.
has brought unstoppable floods.
It's unreal. It's heartbreaking because it is.
After an unusually dry summer, the Pacific Northwest is suddenly getting wet with a vengeance. Saturated ground is giving way to sinkholes and landslides.
We stood over there and basically felt the ground moving and watched the whole thing just slide off.
Among the losses, an entire pumpkin crop floating downriver. While the rain has been easing today, runoff from the mountains presents the next big danger.
We're evacuating the building.
In Mount Vernon, Washington, Richard Allen closed his store today and joined volunteers building a sandbag wall against the rising Skagit River.
We are bagging. We're making a little line so that we will pass it into people.
The Skagit is one of 11 rivers under flood watch, as nearly a third of Washington state is in a declared state of emergency. John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
Coming up on the CBS Evening News, for most politicians, it would be a disaster, but did the FBI's bugging of Philadelphia's mayor actually help his re-election chances? It's tonight's Inside Story. Then later, Wet and Wild. He went over Niagara Falls with just the clothes on his back and survived. The question is, why? International pressure has been mounting on Iran to come clean about its nuclear program. Today, facing possible economic sanctions and a deadline, Iran's leaders agreed to allow UN inspection of all nuclear facilities. An Israeli intelligence source said today if Iran maintains its current pace of nuclear development, it could have the makings of a bomb within a year. This was a mixed day of success and setback in efforts to resolve the conflict between Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland. Britain gave the go-ahead for provincial elections in November, and the Irish Republican Army militants gave up more of their weapons. But hardline Protestants said the IRA action did not go far enough. The hotly contested race for mayor of Philadelphia drew national attention following the disclosure that the FBI was wiretapping the office of incumbent Democrat John Street. But Street isn't running away from the FBI probe, he's running on it as a reason to re-elect him. CBS's Jim Acosta investigated the Philadelphia story for tonight's Inside Story.
FBI raids at City Hall would normally be a knockout punch to a mayor running for re-election. But for Philadelphia's embattled mayor, John Street, the raids, even the discovery of an FBI bug in his office less than a month before voters go to the polls, could not have come at a better time.
The bug could save John Street?
Oh, I think this is one of the best things that has happened to John Street.
Justice Street's financial records have been reportedly seized as part of an investigation into alleged corruption. The mayor has come from behind in the polls by mobilizing the city's African-American community, where there is deep suspicion that the timing of the bug and the raids amount to a smear.
It looks like political profiling.
From the mayor's standpoint, the manner in which federal investigators have handled this case is anything but big brotherly love. He argues this local election has national implications.
We are very concerned about what we see.
Street claims the bugging is part of a national Republican strategy for 2004, a strategy Democrats say that led to the California recall and congressional redistricting in Texas. The mayor's message is resonating with voters.
They're playing for keeps?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that there are some people here who, in this city and in this country, who are very serious about the presidency and about the electoral votes in Pennsylvania, and might be inclined to try to use almost any method in order to seek to get some kind of advantage.
The mayor has made an attempt to turn this into a racial issue.
Street's opponent, Sam Katz, accuses the mayor of trying to change the subject.
He would rather have people focus on Bush than on Street. And if I was in his position, I would rather have people focus on Bush rather than Street.
Should John Street win re-election, his first thank you ought to go not to his staff, but to the FBI.
Political science professor Larry Sabato says given the FBI's troubled history of targeting such African-American leaders as Martin Luther King, the Bureau should have known better, so close to an election.
The FBI may not look at the calendar in planting bugs and doing their operations, but after this screw up, they really ought to buy a calendar, and it ought to have Election Day highly prominent on the calendar.
And that day is just 2 weeks away. Plenty of time for Philadelphia voters to decide who the bug should bite last. Jim Acosta, CBS News, Philadelphia.
Next up on the CBS Evening News, Stop You Cold. That's what this high-tech gadget will do if you miss your car payment. How does it work? Stay tuned. A private study out today says 1/3 of the estimated 44 million Americans who lack health insurance work for big companies with 500 or more employees. And the number of uninsured at large firms is growing, especially among the lowest paid workers. Stocks, they were mixed today. The Dow lost 30 points, the Nasdaq gained 15. In a sluggish economy with jobs hard to come by, it's not surprising that many Americans are falling behind on their bills. But some car dealers are starting to use a new system that forces customers to make their car payments or else. Call it the ultimate in cruise control. CBS's Bob McNamara has the story.
In the used car ghetto of Main Street, USA, dealers say the best idea since buying on time is a gadget that shuts down a car's engine if the car payment is overdue.
Just keeps them honest, yeah. Keeps honest people honest.
Dealer Randy Rapp's had dozens of the devices installed on cars. He's floated the loans, and it saved him thousands.
My repossession rate on cars has gone from about 100 cars a year to 30.
Cheryl Owens delivers newspapers in a van she's buying from Randy Rapp.
Right now it's flashing green, but on the 5th, when my payment's due, it'll turn red.
Owens says the device is bad news for people usually slow at making car payments.
They can't be slow no more.
Each device is a mini computer programmed to electronically shut down the car engine the day after a car payment becomes overdue. And in his office, Randy Rapp can track loans that are paid up and which cars are now disabled. Car consumer watchdog Jack Gillis says a car-killing device smacks of Big Brother watching.
Why don't they give the folks a call and indicate what the situation is rather than shut their vehicle off?
The makers of the engine kill switch say cars won't shut down while running in traffic and that drivers won't be left stranded.
They can't push in an emergency code that lasts for 24 hours to get them back to their home, to get them to the hospital, to get them back to the finance company so they can make their payment.
Used car dealers who carry customer loans like to say they don't have to go to Las Vegas to gamble, they do it every day. And now they have a gadget that lessens the odds of losing even more. Bob McNamara, CBS News, Arlington, Texas.
Still to come on the CBS Evening News, this man plunged over Niagara Falls and lived to tell about it. What possessed him to do it? That story is next. Here on the CBS Evening News, we emphasize news that's important. But sometimes there's a story that's not so important, but it is interesting. For example, the man who deliberately went over Niagara Falls with no protection but his street clothes. As CBS's Jim Axelrod reports, this survivor is now over a barrel with the law.
They may not be getting a real good look at him in Niagara Falls, but that's not stopping people from forming an opinion about Kirk Jones.
What do you think as you look at this path that he took? We think he's a bit of a nutball.
Jones is 40, from Michigan, the first man known to survive an intentional trip over the falls without any kind of safety contraption.
Very calm. I mean, he wasn't screaming, he wasn't flailing or anything, he was just calm.
Brenda McMullen and her husband Terry were horrified watching Jones float by. But fear turned to shock, then relief when he washed up, then stood up on a rock.
We went from being very sullen and just really worried about what we had seen to really happy that this guy actually made it.
Daredevils have done it for years, tempted death at the falls, with varying degrees of success. George Stathakis didn't make it in 1930.
The barrel is caught on the rocks below and the oxygen gives out.
Others did, in specially built barrels and dive bells. The only other person known to survive the trip with no protection was Roger Woodward. He was 7 when he was swept over wearing just a life jacket. Police still don't know why Kirk Jones did it, but he's been charged with criminal mischief and is looking at a $10,000 fine.
Everybody was going crazy. It was just, this is not something you see every day, you know?
That is the understatement of the year at Niagara Falls, and maybe a perfect match for the stunt of the year. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, New York.
Over the falls, part of our world tonight. For the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, click on cbsnews.com. Partially sponsored by Walmart. Giving, helping, doing. Because we live here too, and we believe good works. This is CBS.